She is still inside you, not as a memory, not merely as a woman from your past, but as a presence woven into the architecture of your inner world. Even if she lives oceans away, even if her body rests in the ground, even if you haven't spoken in decades, she remains. This is the first truth of the mother. Complex, she is not gone, because her voice still echoes in your choices, in your relationships, in the words you withhold, in the ones you crave, and even in the silence between them. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, whose work serves as the foundation for much of modern depth psychology, knew this intimately. He wrote, "Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. That force, that invisible inheritance," he named it, the mother complex. This is not simply about your biological mother. It is not a story of blame or betrayal. It is the recognition of an inner image, emotionally charged and archetypal in nature, that continues to animate your inner life, an imprint deeper than memory, a psychic residue of unmet needs, inherited grief, ancestral expectation, and the sacred hunger for nurturing that was never fulfilled. The mother complex is not always cruel. Often it is quiet, whispering, shaping your reactions, your attachments, your emotional blueprint. It speaks in the voice you hear when you doubt yourself, when you stay silent rather than speak your truth, when you shrink for love, believing love requires shrinking. For Jung, the mother is not just a figure of childhood. She is an archetype, eternal, transpersonal, and embedded in the collective unconscious. She appears in every culture, every myth, every dream. She is Gaia. She is Demeter. She is Mary. She is Kali. She is the earth herself. She is both life-giver and life-devourer. This, Jung said, is the paradox of the Great Mother, the dual nature of the maternal archetype, to nourish and to consume. When a child grows up in the presence of this duality, nurtured one moment, devoured the next, the psyche splits. Trust becomes entangled with fear. Love becomes inseparable from guilt. Safety feels indistinguishable from suffocation. The archetype becomes distorted. And when the personal wound fuses with the archetype, the result is psychic confusion. We begin to seek the mother in partners, in mentors, in authority figures, in spiritual teachers. We cast the inner longing outward. We project. We hope that someone will finally offer what the inner child never received: safety, attunement, unconditional love. But the wound is not out there. It is within. And until we see the image of the mother inside us clearly, not just her light, but her shadow, we remain trapped in a loop, longing for connection, yet terrified of intimacy, craving approval yet afraid to be seen, wanting to be held, but secretly fearing the cost of closeness. This is the realm Jung called the shadow mother. She is not the nurturing presence the world praises, not the archetype of compassion or care. She is the part of the mother complex that wounds, not always intentionally but inevitably. She is the unmetabolized sorrow, the unspoken resentment, the ancestral rage that was never grieved. She is the mother who could not mother, and yet she lives in your psyche, not to punish you, but to be seen. To confront her is not to villainize your real mother. It is to separate the woman from the archetype, the personal from the symbolic, the history from the inheritance. Because there is a terrifying truth at the heart of this journey. You will not fully heal until you face her, not your physical mother, but the inner mother, the psychic imprint still shaping your story, the internalized presence, often unconscious, that dictates how you feel about your body, your worth, your voice, your capacity to love. And this is where the sacred work begins, not in blame, but in reclamation. Because for many of us, the mother wound is not just personal, it is collective. It is carried through generations, encoded in emotional DNA. The silence of one mother becomes the suppression of the next. Her shame becomes your shadow. Her limitations become your ceiling, unless someone dares to look inward and say, "It ends with me." Jung did not offer easy answers. He warned that the confrontation with the mother complex would be painful, a death of sorts, the death of the obedient child, the death of the illusion that one day, if we're good enough, quiet enough, successful enough, we might finally earn her love. But the purpose is not rebellion. It is individuation, the sacred psychological process of becoming your whole self. And individuation cannot occur without the separation from the mother, not through physical distance, but psychic differentiation, a sacred severing of the inner bond that once ensured your survival but now threatens your sovereignty. To heal, you must disobey the inner voice that says, "Stay small, stay good, stay safe." You must be willing to step into the unknown and hear your own voice instead. This is not a path for the faint-hearted. It requires courage, ritual, witnessing, a willingness to grieve the mother you never had and the one you wish she could have been, to meet the inner child who waited silently for years. Jung saw this as an initiation. The mother wound is not a pathology. It is a portal, not a flaw to be fixed, but a threshold to be crossed. And when you cross it, when you begin to face the mother within, the entire landscape of your life begins to shift. Patterns dissolve, projection weakens, relationships become clearer, the inner critic softens, your intuition stirs, creativity flows. The ego no longer shrinks at the altar of guilt. The soul begins to take the lead. So let this be the first descent into the sacred darkness, into the womb of your own becoming. Let us walk together through the myths, the dreams, the archetypes, because the journey inward is not lonely, it is holy. You are not the only one carrying this wound, but you may be the first to face it. And in doing so, you begin to transform not only your own life, but the legacy that lives within you. To truly understand the mother wound, we must begin not just with the woman who raised us, but with the myth beneath her, the one older than language, the one living in the bloodline of our dreams. Carl Jung did not reduce the mother to biology. He recognized her as one of the most powerful archetypes in the collective, unconscious, a timeless force that emerges in every age, every myth, every psyche. The Great Mother, she is the one who births all life and the one who consumes it. This paradox lies at the center of the mother archetype. She is creation and destruction, nurturer and devourer, guardian and jailer. We find her in the myth of Isis, who pieces together her beloved Osiris. We find her in Kali, whose rage devours illusions. We find her in the Madonna, the earth, the ocean, the soil. The symbols vary. The archetypal energy does not. Jung called this the bipolarity of the mother archetype, the split between her benevolent and terrifying faces. And for many, this is not just symbolic, it is personal. Because when a child experiences the mother as both loving and dangerous, safe and suffocating, their inner world fractures. Confusion replaces clarity. Trust becomes conditional. Love becomes laced with fear. The archetype is not clean. It is muddy. And when it fuses with personal trauma, the psychological consequences are profound. This is the danger Jung warned of. The confusion between the personal mother, the woman with her own wounds, regrets, and limitations, and the archetypal mother, the larger-than-life image encoded in the psyche. When these two merge, we lose perspective. We become ensnared in a psychic labyrinth, projecting the inner image onto others. Lovers, bosses, teachers, friends. We see not who they are, but what we are still unconsciously seeking. To be nurtured, to be chosen, to be saved. And because the archetype is bigger than any human can hold, disappointment is inevitable. The partner does not save us. The mentor cannot meet our endless longing. And the cycle repeats. We think we are falling in love, but often we are falling into a reenactment, a repetition of an emotional terrain familiar since infancy. A mother who gives, then withdraws, who praises, then criticizes, who loves but never without a price. This is how the archetype traps us, by hijacking reality and replacing it with myth. The real becomes symbolic. The symbolic becomes mistaken for truth. Jung emphasized that the only way out is to separate the symbolic from the personal. To do this, we must go within. In dreams, the mother may appear as a glowing queen, a terrible witch, a weeping woman, a towering giantess. She may bless, she may devour, but she is always a mirror. She reflects not the literal woman, but your relationship to the feminine principle within yourself, your ancestry, your unconscious. The Great Mother, Jung said, lives in all of us, and when we are disconnected from her vastness, we suffer. We lose touch with nature, with intuition, with the body, with the unknown. We become addicted to control, logic, performance. We try to manage our pain instead of feel it. We rationalize what was never rational. We ignore the soul's call. But the mother archetype doesn't vanish when ignored. She returns, in relationships that echo our wound, in dreams that haunt, in chronic anxiety that won't be soothed by reason, in creative blocks, in a body that aches with no visible cause. She whispers, "Come back. Come home, face me." The sacred task is not to destroy the mother. It is to integrate her, to hold both faces of the archetype in your awareness, the light and the dark, the nurturing and the devouring, the one who loved and the one who hurt. To idealize the mother is to deny her shadow. To demonize her is to reject her light. Both distort the truth. And until we retrieve those projections, until we face what is unresolved within us, we remain bound, not by her, but by the image we carry of her. This is where depth psychology becomes not just a theory but a path. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming one's whole, authentic self, requires a deep encounter with the archetypes. And the mother is the first, the most primal, the one who teaches you whether the world is safe, whether your voice matters, whether love means freedom or entrapment. If that early mirror was cracked, the adult psyche will reflect those distortions. You may feel you must earn love, that your worth is conditional, that your needs are too much, or worse, that you are not enough. But these are not truths. They are wounds. And wounds are not weaknesses. They are invitations. To begin healing, you must see the mother not only as the woman who gave you life, but as the vessel of forces older than her own story. She did not invent the archetype. She inherited it, just as you did. She became a channel for something greater, perhaps without knowing it, perhaps unwillingly, perhaps tragically. And if you can see that, something shifts. The archetype becomes visible. And when something becomes visible, it loses its power to possess. This is the first step. Recognition. To see the mother image in your mind. To separate her from the woman in your history. To see her not as a goddess or a demon, but as a symbol. A carrier of both your pain and your potential. A threshold, not a prison. And when you reach this threshold, you stand at the edge of transformation. You begin to reclaim what was lost. Your autonomy, your voice, your inner authority. This is not a straight path, it is a spiral. One day you may feel free. The next, the old voice returns. That is not failure, that is the nature of inner work. The psyche resists sudden change. It loops back to test what has truly shifted. But each time you choose awareness over reaction, each time you pause before collapsing into the old role, you untangle one more thread of the complex. This is the work. It is not glamorous. It is not quick. But it is sacred. To see your mother not just as a person, but as a mirror of archetypal energy. To hold both her humanity and your pain. To reclaim the lost fragments of your soul that once sought her approval to exist. This is the beginning of sovereignty. This is the first act of the adult self. Once you see her, she cannot be unseen. The shadow mother, not the one who fed and held you, but the one who hovered. The one who needed. The one who consumed instead of comforted. This is not the archetype of care. It is the archetype of control. The devouring face of the maternal, wrapped in the language of love. Jung warned us. The mother complex contains both the giver and the taker. When unintegrated, when left unconscious, it becomes a psychic trap. One that binds not only your thoughts, but your very sense of self. You are no longer a person. You are a role, a function, a reflection of someone else's unmet needs. The shadow mother speaks in subtle whispers, not overt commands. She tells you not to dream too big, not to shine too brightly. She tells you that love is earned, and that independence is abandonment, that your truth is dangerous, your voice too loud, your boundaries cruel. She doesn't live outside of you anymore. She lives within. You can move cities, change your name, cut off contact, and yet, her voice arrives before your own. Before you speak, before you act, before you even know what you want. This is how deep the complex runs. In Jungian terms, the shadow mother is a complex, an autonomous part of the psyche, charged with emotion, rooted in memory but acting with a life of its own. And unless made conscious, it operates in the dark, influencing how you see yourself, how you love, how you relate, how you dare, and how you don't. Her most powerful tool is guilt, not the healthy guilt that points to a moral wrong, but an ancestral, irrational guilt, the kind that says, if I become myself, I betray her, the kind that confuses self-expression with selfishness, the kind that calls boundaries a punishment rather than protection. Jung described this as psychic infantilization, a condition in which the ego remains in a childlike state, emotionally dependent on the mother's approval, even long after she is physically gone. You may have your own apartment, your own job, your own children, but inside, the child still waits, still seeks, still apologizes for existing. This inner entrapment isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides behind spiritual language. I'm just trying to be a good person. I should be grateful. She did her best. But beneath these rationalizations is often a deeper, unspoken truth. I'm not allowed to be free. Jung said the psyche prefers the known hell to the unknown heaven. The mother's control, though painful, is familiar. To separate feels like death. To become an adult feels like betrayal. And so we stay small. We perform. We pretend. Until the performance cracks. This is often when people come to therapy. When the mask no longer holds. When relationships collapse. When the body begins to speak through fatigue, anxiety, or chronic illness. When the soul whispers, "This is not who I am." The shadow mother appears in dreams as witches, wolves, cages, storms, or swallowed light. In mythology, She is the goddess who refuses to release her children, the dragon guarding the gold, the sea that threatens to drown. But Jung taught that these symbols are not meant to be feared. They are invitations. The monster is not your enemy. She is your threshold. To confront the shadow mother is to begin the alchemical process of inner transformation. This is the Negredo phase, the blackening, the symbolic death, the dissolving of illusions. Here the ego must crumble. The obedient child must die, not in body but in identity. Because until that false self dissolves, the true self cannot rise. And the path through this darkness? Active imagination. Jung's method of active imagination is a way of engaging directly with the unconscious. You visualize the shadow mother. You speak to her. You ask her what she wants. You let your inner child speak. You express the rage you were taught to hide, the grief you never gave yourself permission to feel, the betrayal you've been silencing for years. And in that dialogue, something extraordinary happens. You stop being the child. You become the witness. You stop seeking approval. You start listening to your own voice. The shadow mother is no longer a silent dictator. She becomes a figure you can confront, understand, even integrate. You learn her language. You see her wounds. And eventually you say, "I see you, but I no longer belong to you." This confrontation may come with grief, with collapse, with mourning for the mother you never had and the self you never got to be. But Jung said this collapse is sacred. It is not the end. It is the initiation. The shadow mother guards the gate to your soul, and only by facing her can you pass through. But this is not about defeating her. It is about reclaiming what she holds hostage: your fire, your freedom, your feminine. Because the shadow mother doesn't just wound you. She wounds your inner feminine, your intuition, your softness, your sensuality, your wildness, your creativity. She teaches you to fear your instincts, to distrust your body, to be ashamed of your emotions. She tells you to trade authenticity for acceptance. And the cost? Disconnection, flatness, fatigue, spiritual hunger. You stop creating. You stop listening. You forget who you are. But when you face her, truly face her, the opposite happens. Your creativity returns. Your joy becomes unshackled. Your soul starts to speak, and for the first time, you hear it. You begin to mother yourself. This is the inner rebalancing of the feminine principle. The shift from fear to feeling, from performance to presence, from exile to embodiment, and the final act of liberation, ritual. Because the psyche understands symbols. It responds to ceremony, burning a letter never sent, speaking your truth aloud in a safe space, drawing the image of the inner child finally standing. These are not dramatic gestures. They are sacred signals. They tell the unconscious, it is time. Jung taught that individuation must be marked. The death of the child's self, the birth of the adult, the end of one myth, the beginning of another. And when the ritual is done, when the spell breaks, something miraculous occurs. Compassion, not forced, not performed, but real. The mother becomes human, not goddess, not monster, just a woman, wounded, flawed, bound by her own complexes. And in that moment, you no longer need to blame her. And you no longer need her permission to be free, because the journey was never about her. It was about you, becoming who you were always meant to be. To separate is not to sever love. This is the greatest misunderstanding of the healing journey, especially when it comes to the mother. We believe that stepping away is rejection, that saying no more is cruelty, that becoming ourselves is betrayal. But in Jungian psychology, separation is sacred. It is not abandonment. It is individuation, the act of claiming your right to exist. outside the gravitational pull of another's expectations, especially when that other was once your source of life, nourishment, identity. The mother complex, Jung taught, is not just psychological, it is mythic. It draws its power from the collective unconscious. The child's bond to the mother is archetypal. It predates thought. It is instinctual, emotional, energetic. And for that reason, breaking away from it feels like death. But it is not death, it is birth, the second birth, the one that frees the soul. Jung described this as the ego's crucifixion, the symbolic death of the compliant child, the one who twisted herself to fit, silenced herself to survive, denied herself to belong. This inner crucifixion is not visible to the world, but its pain is real. It shows up as existential crisis, depression, identity collapse. Why? Because everything familiar begins to dissolve. When you begin to walk away from the mother complex, it feels like losing the only map you've ever known. The roles you played, peacemaker, good girl, silent son, fixer, no longer fit. The people around you, often unconsciously invested in your old identity, may resist your growth. The inner voice that once whispered obedience now screams, "What are you doing? Go back, be small, be safe." But that voice is not your truth. It is the echo of a time when fusion meant survival, because once it did. As a child, your attachment to the mother, whether secure or not, was your lifeline. Your nervous system was shaped by her tone, her presence, her absence. You adapted to her moods. You mirrored her pain. You absorbed her projections. Not because you were weak, but because you were wired to connect. And at that age, connection always came before authenticity. This is why ritual matters. You don't just walk away. You mark the departure. You create boundaries not to punish, but to protect. You build inner practices that root you in your truth. You mother yourself. You begin to recognize the positive face of the archetypal mother within you, not the voice of control or guilt, but the voice of compassion, of care, of presence. You speak to yourself gently. You allow rest. You allow desire. You stop treating your needs as problems to be solved, and slowly a new image of the feminine is born, not from myth, but from you, the part of you that creates, that feels, that dreams, that dares, the part that was never fully allowed to live, until now. And so the journey continues, not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. With every choice you make in alignment with your soul, not your fear, you dissolve another thread in the old tapestry. You stop repeating the past. You stop reenacting the role. You begin to live, not as a child, not as a reaction, but as a sovereign adult. And in doing so, you don't just heal yourself. You change the story for everyone who comes after. In the next part, we will explore what that healing looks like, the symptoms of the unhealed mother wound, the body's cry for integration, and the soul's longing for reunion with the lost feminine. Because individuation is not about leaving the mother behind. It is about finding yourself beyond her shadow. You may not have spoken her name in years. You may believe you've moved on. You may have grown, succeeded, even thrived. But if the wound still whispers, if the same patterns continue to loop, there is more work to do. The mother wound does not always shout. It often lingers in the background, shaping you quietly. It speaks through your choices, your fears, your fatigue. And unless made conscious, Jung taught, it becomes your fate. You will call it life. But it is not life. It is the echo of a story unfinished. These are the signs that the mother wound still lives within you, not as a failure, but as a calling, a summons from the depths of your soul to return, retrieve, and remember. 1. The inner critic and chronic self-doubt. If you carry a voice inside you that questions every move, second-guesses every decision, and poisons every success with whispers of unworthiness, you are hearing the internalized shadow mother. This is not your intuition. It is inherited programming. It is the reflection of early emotional experiences where love was conditional. Approval came with a price, or affection was offered then withdrawn. Jung called this a complex, autonomous, self-perpetuating, and emotionally charged. And unless integrated, it stifles the self before it can ever fully form. 2. Fear of autonomy and clinging to dependence. Do you find yourself frozen when asked to stand alone? Do you long for freedom but feel paralyzed when faced with choice? The mother wound teaches that autonomy is dangerous, that to separate is to abandon, and that independence equals disloyalty. This is not immaturity. It is psychic loyalty. It is the soul's unspoken belief that in order to love her, you must remain small. 3. Guilt, shame, and the inherited burden. You thrive, then feel guilty. You speak your truth, then apologize. You rest, and the shame creeps in. This is not your guilt. It is ancestral. It is the guilt of surpassing the woman who raised you, the shame of becoming what she never gave herself permission to be. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent, and for many that burden still weighs heavy." 4. Self-abandonment and the pleaser pattern. When a mother's love is contingent, when love is earned by silence, obedience, or sacrifice, the child learns to betray themselves in order to stay connected. That child becomes an adult who abandons themselves for peace, who says yes when they mean no, who offers everything, then wonders why they feel empty. This is the wound reenacted, the inner child performing, hoping this time love will be unconditional. But love bought by sacrifice is not love, it is survival. 5. Repetitive relationships that mirror the wound. You are drawn to partners who criticize, control, disappear, or overwhelm. You call it attraction. But it is reenactment, a psychic attempt to resolve what was never healed. Jung taught that the unconscious repeats trauma not to punish, but to heal. We unconsciously seek the familiar, even when it wounds us, until we recognize the pattern, until we say, "This is not love. This is memory." 6. The core belief. I am not enough. This may be the mother wound's deepest root. The belief that your worth is conditional, that your very being is too much, or not enough. That if you were different, quieter, brighter, better, things would have been okay. This belief infiltrates everything. Your work, your relationships, your creativity. It becomes the background hum of shame, the soul's silent cry to be seen. 7. Suppression of creativity and fear of expression. The archetypal mother is not only the nurturer, she is the creator. When the mother archetype is distorted, when she is devouring rather than nourishing, creativity becomes dangerous. Expression becomes unsafe. The child learns that shining provokes rejection, or worse, retaliation. And so as adults, we stifle our voice. We censor our art. We dull our joy. Not because we lack talent, but because we fear being visible. 8. Somatic symptoms. The body's cry for healing. What the psyche represses, the body expresses. Chronic fatigue, autoimmune issues, digestive disorders, tension in the throat and chest. These are not just physical. They are often symbolic. The body remembers what the mind has exiled. Jung knew this well. He believed the soul speaks in symbols. And when the mother wound is unhealed, The body becomes the canvas for that message. 9. Spiritual alienation and existential emptiness. You have all the tools, the practices, the knowledge, and yet something is missing. This is the final symptom. The severing from the feminine principle, the great mother within. When that connection is broken, we feel spiritually orphaned. We seek and seek, but nothing satisfies. We chase meaning but feel hollow. We mistake doing for being. This is the soul's hunger. For reconnection, for belonging, not just to a person, but to the deep wellspring of life itself. The child who was never seen must now see themselves. This is where healing begins, not by blaming, not by bypassing, but by naming, feeling, reclaiming. The mother wound is not a personal flaw. It is a collective inheritance. It is the echo of generations. And you, by facing it, become the one who breaks the spell. Jung did not teach us to resent our mothers. He taught us to reclaim our projections, to make conscious what was buried, to become adults, not in age but in soul. And the healing? It is not about fixing the past. It is about honoring it without being held hostage by it. It is about reparenting yourself, choosing your voice over your silence, your sovereignty over your guilt, your truth over your performance. And finally, it is about creating a new relationship with the mother archetype, not the one distorted by wounding, but the one reimagined through your own healing. She becomes the whisper of intuition, the sanctuary of your body, the fire of your creativity, the tenderness of your self-talk. This is the sacred reunion, not with the mother who hurt you, but with the mother within, the one you are now becoming. Final reflection. You will not heal the mother wound by going back. You will heal by going in, by descending into your depths, by facing the shadow, by feeling the grief, and then by rising, not as someone who needs to be loved, but as someone who loves themselves into wholeness. This is not the end of your journey. It is the threshold, and beyond it, a life that is yours. Not a reaction, not a repetition, but a revelation. You are not too much. You are not too broken. You are not unworthy. You are the one who answered the call, the one who said yes to the sacred work, the one who dared to walk the path home. And from that wholeness, all things real are born. Welcome back to yourself.